Hello guys, welcome back. Now today we're going to be talking about the NHL and specifically if the playoffs started today. Now, if the NHL playoffs started today, it would really beg the question, which teams would get into the playoffs and which team will ultimately win the Stanley Cup? Now, when we look at the teams that would get into the playoffs if the NHL season were to end today, it's really interesting because there's a lot of teams that would not have been predicted to make the playoffs a couple of months ago, but there's a lot of surprise with these teams, and honestly, there's a lot of amazing matchups. Now, I'm going to quickly go over the matchups to start out before we do my predictions. Now, we're going to start with the Western Conference and the first series between the Nashville Predators and the Dallas Stars. The Nashville Predators being number 1 in the entire Western Conference, the Dallas Stars being the second wildcard team in the Western Conference. Then you have Calgary, who is number 1 in the Pacific Division, versus the Minnesota Wild, who were having the first wildcard spot. Then you go to the Divisional Series. You start with Colorado versus Winnipeg, Colorado being second in the Central, and the Winnipeg Jets being third in the Central. And then last but not least, you have the San Jose Sharks versus the Vegas Golden Knights, San Jose being second in the Pacific Division, and Vegas being third. Now, the Eastern Conference is equally as exciting and interesting. Now, the first matchup in the Eastern Conference is the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the New York Islanders. The Tampa Bay Lightning being the first overall position in the Eastern Conference. The New York Islanders having that second wildcard spot. Then you have the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are first in the Metropolitan Division, against the Boston Bruins, who have that wildcard spot, that second wildcard spot. Then you go to the Divisional Series, where we start with Toronto versus Buffalo. Toronto being second in the Atlantic Division. Then you have Buffalo being third in the Atlantic Division. Then you have the Washington Capitals going against the New York Rangers. Washington being second in the Metropolitan, and the New York Rangers being third. Now, it is up to me to go through every single series, who I think will win, and of course, ultimately, who I think will win the Stanley Cup. Now, we're going to start in the Western Conference and make our way to the Eastern Conference. And our first matchup, of course, going back onto it, we have the Nashville Predators versus the Dallas Stars. Now, this series, you guys know I'm a Dallas Stars fan. I have them number 1, as always. But I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The Nashville Predators are most likely to get a sweep in this series. The Dallas Stars have been inconsistent. They haven't really put it all together yet. And with the Nashville Predators, them being first in the entire Western Conference, I gotta give it to them, and I'm gonna give the Nashville Predators to win that in 4 games. Now we're going to go to the Divisional Series in the Central Division, and between the Colorado Avalanche and the Winnipeg Jets, this series is honestly going to be a very fun one. There's a lot of opportunities for both Winnipeg and Colorado to advance. They're both pretty solid teams, but in this situation, I do see the Colorado Avalanche winning this. I'm going to say they win it in 7 games, mostly because I think that Colorado Avalanche first line is too good right now. They're playing fantastic. They're on a winning streak, and with the Winnipeg Jets, they've had some problems. The goaltending has been a little bit rough, and I think in a 7-game series, Colorado will ultimately get out of there and get to the second round. Now, the next series is a very interesting one between the Calgary Flames and the Minnesota Wild. Now, this really series could go a lot of different ways. I could see either team winning, but I'm going to say the Minnesota Wild win this series in 6, mostly because I think Minnesota has Devin Dubnyk, and just goaltending-wise, I think Minnesota has the edge. While David Rittich for Calgary has been amazing so far this season, I'm not sure how much longer he can really keep that up. And I feel like Minnesota is just a stronger team in general, and while Calgary definitely has potential, I just don't see them getting past the first round. The next series between the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights is, of course, the rematch of round 2 last year, and that series was really a brawl. It really showed the rivalry between the two teams, and this series could be the same exact way. Both teams are pretty solid, and when it comes down to it, both have playoff experience. Now, for this series, I'm going to say the Vegas Golden Knights win this in 6. Because the playoffs, if they were to start today, I think Vegas would have much more better momentum. They've played amazing in the last few games. I think they've been on a 5-game winning streak. So I'm going to say Vegas wins this series, mostly because of the momentum that they've had in the last couple of weeks. Now we're on to the second round of the Western Conference, and the start of the Western Conference second round starts with the Nashville Predators versus the Colorado Avalanche. Now, of course, this is a rematch of last year's first round, where Colorado just squeaked into the playoffs. Nashville was the number 1 team, and this could be the same intensity, and I feel this series will be pretty close, but at the same time, I do see Nashville winning this. I'm going to say they win it in 5 games. Colorado is going to give up a fight, just like they did last year, but I just don't see them getting past a team like Nashville, at least in the playoffs. Now, the second matchup in the second round is between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Minnesota Wild. Not too much of a rivalry there, but this is still going to be a very solid matchup. This could go either way, honestly. When I pick Minnesota to win Calgary, they could maybe go on a run, but at the same time, I'm going to see the Vegas Golden Knights win this series in 6. I feel like this will be a close series, but at the same time, I just don't see Minnesota having the steam to go 3 rounds. Vegas has already shown that they could last year, getting to the Stanley Cup Final, and I feel like the experience will just go in Vegas's favor. Which means going into the third round, we have the big matchup between the Nashville Predators and the Vegas Golden Knights. And this one, I had a tough time really going back and forth. I thought either team could win, but at the end of the day, I'm going to predict the Nashville Predators to win this. I'm going to say the Nashville Predators win this in 5 games and get back to the Stanley Cup Final, back where they were back in 2017. And with the Nashville Predators, I feel like they just lost a good series versus the Winnipeg Jets. And if the Nashville Predators were to go to the third round, I'm not sure if Vegas would have made the Stanley Cup Final. But even with that, I feel like on this matchup, on paper, Vegas, while it's a decent team, they're playing well, I just feel like Nashville will get the edge, and they're probably just a better overall team. Now, since I narrowed down the Western Conference playoffs, let's switch to the Eastern Conference side, where the first matchup is between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Islanders. Now, of course, the New York Islanders have been surprising a lot of people with their record so far. They've been playing decent without John Tavares, and they're showing a lot of people that, hey, they're not terrible. And, of course, they're still in a wild card spot at that second position. Tampa will be the #1 spot in the Eastern Conference. And with that, I just don't see New York winning this series. Even though they got some firepower at forward, and the goaltending has been solid for them, I just don't see them getting past a team like Tampa. Even if the playoffs ended today, Tampa would have Dumoulin as their starter, but even then, I just do not see New York winning that, and I have Tampa Bay winning that series in 5 games. Now, the next matchup is one that might just become a classic, and that's between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Buffalo Sabres. Now, this series, I could see going either way. With Buffalo's former 10-game winning streak, they're really, really hot right now, and I could see them going really far in the playoffs if they do make it. But, of course, being against the Toronto Maple Leafs, I just do not see that happening. I see this going to a 7-game, being a 7-game series, but I see the Toronto Maple Leafs winning it in 7. I think Buffalo will get a big fight, but I feel like the defense will kind of crumble them a little bit defensively, and of course, Toronto Maple Leafs just have firepower to boot. The next series between the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Boston Bruins. This one could be a very solid one, but in the end, I see the Columbus Blue Jackets winning this in 5 games, mostly because if the playoffs were to start today, Boston would have a very injury-riddled lineup. Their defense is practically all injured besides guys like Torrey Krug. The offense, guys like Bergeron are still out. They really are missing a lot of guys, while the goaltending has stepped up a little bit. I just do not see them getting a past a team like Columbus, which is healthy, and of course, Columbus is also very, very good. Now, the last matchup in the first round of the Eastern Conference is the Washington Capitals versus the New York Rangers. And, of course, this was a rematch of, I think, 2015, where I think the New York Rangers won that series, Derek Stepan getting the overtime winner. But when it comes down to this will be a very solid series. These two teams go way back in the rivalry. But in the end, I do see Washington winning in 6 games. New York, so far this season, has been a big surprise. Guys like Henrik Lundqvist have really stepped up. Guys like Philip Chychrun, Chris Kreider. I feel like New York has been a solid team so far, but I just don't see them getting past a team like Washington, at least at this point. So, to start out the second round, we have a beautiful matchup between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs. This series is going to be an instant classic. It'll go down as one of the best in history. This could be amazing, and of course, both of these teams have serious firepower at the forward position and on the defense. But when it comes down to it, of course, if the playoffs were to end today, as I mentioned before, Domingue would be the starting goaltender for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And in the playoffs, I don't have a lot of hope in Louis Domingue doing too much. So in this series, I do predict the Toronto Maple Leafs to win it in 5 games, and I think the goaltending will really sink Tampa as it started to already sink them in the last couple of weeks. The next series in the second round is going to be also another great matchup between the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Washington Capitals. Now, this one is going to be amazing, the Battle of the Metropolitan Division, but it's going to be a sweet, sweet matchup. And when it comes down to it, both of these teams could do a lot in the playoffs. Washington won the Stanley Cup last year, so there's a lot of experience when it comes down to it. And, of course, Columbus has never gotten past the first round in their franchise history. And I feel like in this playoffs, if it were to end today, they do a lot of good things. And in this series, I do see the Columbus Blue Jackets actually getting it done for once and winning in 7 games. It's going to be a serious brawl, but I do think they can do it. Which leaves an Eastern Conference battle between the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Columbus would have the home ice advantage, technically, being first in the Metropolitan Division, but with Toronto, they have so much firepower that I don't think it's going to matter, and in the end, I see the Toronto Maple Leafs winning in 6 games, and while I predict Columbus to go a far ways in the playoffs, I just don't see them getting past a team like Toronto, who is now getting guys like Austin Matthews healthy, and if they get William Nylander soon, this Toronto Maple Leafs team is going to be lethal, and in the playoffs, they are going to be lethal. Which means that the Stanley Cup battle between the Nashville Predators and the Toronto Maple Leafs will be a reality. If the playoffs were to end today, I think these two teams would be the best out of all the playoff teams. When it comes down to Nashville and Toronto, this could be an epic Stanley Cup final. It would seriously be that, and I don't understate that because both of these teams really have so much potential. Both of these teams haven't won a Stanley Cup in a long time when it comes to Toronto, and Nashville has never won a Stanley Cup. So these two teams are hungry for it. They've both been burning for that Stanley Cup, and I think it'll be an epic battle. And honestly, I feel like both of these teams have a real shot at that Stanley Cup. But in the end, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs winning this series in 6 games. To me, when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, their offense is too lethal. If the defense can step up a little bit, I think they're Stanley Cup contenders. And with this team, getting guys like Austin Matthews back, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And throughout the playoffs, they have a little bit of an easier teams besides the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I feel like they can get through them pretty easily with their overloaded offense and with guys like Frederik Andersen as goaltending. I feel like they'll just be able to squeak out Nashville just by a little bit, and poor Nashville fans losing the Stanley Cup final again. And yes, I know, I'm totally jinxing Toronto with this, but again, these are just my thoughts about if the playoffs were to end today, and to me, I think Toronto has the best shot. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think about my prediction about the Toronto Maple Leafs winning the Stanley Cup if the playoffs were to end today? And of course, who would be your Stanley Cup winner? And let me know your brackets as well. But of course, if you guys want some more Grav videos, you can watch this video where I talk about Team USA and my World Junior Championship roster predictions. But that is going it for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you like and subscribe again. Hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, tell me down below in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on my winner and who your Stanley Cup winner would be in this scenario. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.